All right, Jupiter's Legacy Season 1 on Netflix just came out. It is the latest comic book to TV show adaptation, entering a now very crowded field, following in the footsteps of Invincible and The Boys, two very successful recent adaptations. Jupiter's Legacy is written by Scottish comic book writer Mark Millar. Mark Millar is a very popular comic book writer. So many of his comics have been adapted into movies and whatnot. He has his own publishing line called Millar World with all of these creator owned books that he wrote. And recently, Netflix bought out his publishing company and bought the rights to all of his books. And they're going to be adapting tons of his work. And the first thing they're adapting is Jupiter's Legacy. Now, on my channel, I've covered Jupiter's Legacy as well as its prequel comic, Jupiter's Circle. So if you want to compare and contrast the TV show to the comic, check out my coverage on that. But Jupiter's Legacy, for those of you that are unaware, is a story about some superheroes. We start off in the 1920s and 30s, and we meet these six people, and they get powers. And they become this superhero team called the Union. The members of the Union are Sheldon Sampson, the Utopian, Grace Kennedy Sampson, Lady Liberty, his wife, Walter Sampson, Brainwave, George Hutchins, Sky Fox, Richard Conrad, Blue Bolt, as well as Fitz Small, the Flare. In the comic book, the character was called Bob Fletton, the Flare, but basically the same character there. So these six heroes are like the golden age heroes, and they've been around for many years, but in the current day, we have their children, and their children are also superheroes, but their children are kind of dicks, and they are more so in it for themselves and in it for the fame. And in the TV show, this is most portrayed through Chloe, who seems to be more focused on her fashion deals and photo shoots and doing drugs and partying rather than being an actual superhero. So it's a real kind of commentary on consumerism and fame, and how if someone was a superhero in real life, they would really be maybe focused on that rather than their altruistic doing good for society. This is something we've seen explored in The Boys. Well, it's also explored to a little bit of a lesser extent in Jupiter's Legacy. Now, I've read the Jupiter's Legacy and Circle comics, and I find them to be immensely fun. However, I do have some problems with the comic. Jupiter's Circle is very good because we are spending some time in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I like those time periods, and we get to really explore these various characters and really flesh them out and have some good moments there. But one problem with Legacy, which is really the main thrust of the series, is that with Legacy, we are introduced to all of these colorful, interesting characters, but we don't spend that much time with them. We don't get that much character building, and we don't flesh everything out that much. The story is just super quick in the comics. We're getting right into the action and going into all of these crazy things. So one thing I've always felt is that, in theory, a TV show adaptation should, in theory, be very good, because you will get to take your time with it, slow it down, and really expand the world and flesh out all of these characters. So that is one thing that I think the Netflix series does add to the comic a little bit. We do get to learn more about these characters and spend time with them and flesh that out. So I do like that. However, I do have to say, while I expected the Netflix series to sort of stretch out the source material and pad it a bit and add to it, I was not expecting them to cover so little of the source material. Over the course of 8 episodes in season 1, they barely covered anything. They covered maybe the equivalent of 2 issues of the original comic. Maybe 2.5 if you take some plot threads from a few of the other issues. But that is crazy. Over the course of 8 episodes to cover so little. So the pacing of the TV show is just a little bit too slow for me. Now, in the TV show, I would say 50% of each episode is devoted to the past. So we're in the 1920s and 30s and getting some of that origin backstory. And then the other 50% is set in the future. The problem with the origin backstory is that in the comic, the Utopian and his friends, they go to this island and they get these powers, and then they come back to America and they're heroes. Mark Millar in the comic, he covered that in like 10 to 15 pages. That's really quick. He quickly explained it and then he got on with it. Whereas Netflix devotes pretty much the entire 8 episodes, 50% of each episode of the season, to telling that whole island backstory, and it's just too much time to devote to that. I really wanted them to just get that over with and get on to some of the cooler stuff. In the current day, we didn't get to as much as I would have liked, and as much as I thought they should have got to. Now, I'm not going to give spoilers on the comic if you don't want to know what's going to happen, but let me just tippy toe around it and say in issue 3 of the comic, there's a big superhero battle that kind of changes everything and really changes the whole situation in the book going forward. And the TV show did not get to that in season 1, and I really expected them to. I really thought the season finale was going to be that big confrontation, and it did not happen. So that's disappointing. Although I am really excited for season 2 to finally see some of that stuff go down, but I really would have liked it to see that in season 1. Now, despite some of all that stuff, let me talk about some of the other things about season 1. So, with regards to the costumes, I didn't think they were maybe the best, especially the old makeup they put on a lot of the actors to make them look older in the current day was not amazing. I don't know if Josh Duhamel looked the best when he was old man utopian. Some of the CGI was not as great as it could have been. With regards to the casting, I do feel everyone, for the most part, looks like their comic book counterpart. Everyone visually kind of looks like how I would expect them to look like. Now, we do have a little bit of some race swapping going on. So the Flare is played by a black actor now, which is totally fine to me. Hutch is played by an African American actor in the TV show, which actually makes more sense. In the comic book, Hutch was drawn to clearly look white, but his mom was definitely black, so he should look like how he looks in the TV show rather than how he looks in the comic. So I think that was a good change, actually. I also thought Chloe looked so much like her comic book counterpart. I really liked the casting of her. One thing I do have to say, though, is that I find all of the actors to be very serviceable. They're doing an okay job, but no one's really exceptional to me. In The Boys, the actor that plays the Homelander, I think, is phenomenal. Every time I see him, he just sucks me into the show. He's so good. In Invincible, the voice cast in that is just great. Everyone is doing an amazing job in that. Whereas in Jupiter's Legacy, everyone is fine. I don't think anyone is particularly amazing, though. So that's a little bit disappointing, I suppose. So, in conclusion, even though I am a little bit disappointed with season 1 and a little bit underwhelmed, I'm still happy because we are staying relatively true to the source material, so that is good. Even though the TV show is going about it at a much slower pace, we're still getting there. We're on the trajectory to some of the storylines I do want to see, so I am pretty excited for season 2. And season 1 was still entertaining. It's still superhero stuff and some superhero battles, so there is some fun to be had. I'm going to give season 1 a 7 out of 10. I did not enjoy it as much as Invincible or The Boys, but there is some good stuff here. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to check out my coverage of the Jupiter's Legacy comic book series on my channel if you want to see how the comic book storyline goes. And also, this weekend on Sunday, I will be beginning my coverage of the Sandman comic, so be sure to check that out.